We have a great panel ahead of us, right? 3 months to November. So if you're on a campaign, there's no better day than today on how to maximize your political partnerships, how to get them rolling, supporting your campaign in a number of ways. And we have three experts that are going to tell us what their organization can do for a candidate, can do for a campaign, some of the best practices, some of the worst don'ts that you shouldn't be doing with these partnerships. And so let's get started. We have Ivan, Ashley Blue for Swing Left, and Anthony Elmo from Texas American Federation of Teachers. Thank you all for joining. So, okay. So we'll just quickly do a little background. Who are you? What's your responsibilities within your various organizations? We'll start with Ashley, go to Anthony, and then to Ivan.
Who am I? That's like mad existential. Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday. Campaign life is moving fast. Welcome to August. My name is Ashley Blue. I'm coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina. So if anybody from Fayetteville is in the arena camp this year, please drop it in the chat. I am political director at Swing Left. Swing Left is a grassroots organization that has over 1 million volunteers and donors. And we do two big things for campaigns. We push money directly to candidates, and we provide volunteer capacity through our organizations across the states. So we are really excited this year to work hard on flipping the Senate. We want to win big races in targeted states, in their state legislatures, and we also are fighting really hard for the presidency this year. So we've got a couple big missions over at Swing Left, and that's what I spend my time doing. So it's good to be here with y'all.
Thank you. Anthony?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me tonight. My name is Anthony Elmo, and I am the political director at the Texas American Federation of Teachers. I've worked in campaigns for a long time now. I worked on both of President Obama's presidential campaigns, the first one and the re-elect. I worked for the United Food and Commercial Workers as their political director here in Texas for a long time as well. So I'm very familiar with the labor movement. Shout out to all the labor people that I hope are on the call right now. For all the folks who are on organized campaigns, I hope y'all are out there too. This is just a great opportunity to speak with you all tonight. So at Texas AFT, we're an organization that is multifaceted in a lot of ways. We're an organization that is a union. We're a labor union that is functioning on behalf of members who have chosen to become union members here in Texas. We are an organization that's focused on advocacy on behalf of teachers at the congressional level, at the legislative level. And we are an organization that's involved in grassroots political work as well. So, whether that's knocking doors, making phone calls, giving political donations, all those types of things. So we're doing a lot. We're spread pretty thin right now because Texas is the biggest battleground state in the nation. So we're working through all the great opportunities that's giving us this year. So thank y'all for having me very much.
Ivan?
Hey there, everybody. Thanks for having me on tonight. Definitely feeling like the odd one out as the banker on a call. I don't think Arena usually has too many bankers on a call like this, but Amalgamated Bank is very proud to be both Arena's bank, but also the bank for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the DNC, Joe Biden campaign, and like 1 million campaigns all around that. We also are often the bank for the groups that campaigns are working with, from Sierra Club to League of Conservation Voters, a bunch of organizations on the labor side. We were started as a labor bank almost 100 years ago. So we are really sort of the bank for the progressive family. My background was working in environmental issues, helping to manage coordinated campaigns for the environmental community. I spent a few years working with OFA during the second Obama term, helping to manage some of the advocacy campaigns that we were running, and that's where I first connected with some of the folks who are working in the arena right now. So I'm just happy to be here and see if I still remember some of my organizing stuff after 4 years of being a banker.
Awesome. Yeah, and thank you again for all being here. I know Ashley and Anthony mentioned what you guys typically do for campaigns, whether it's knock on doors or help them organize in different ways. Because of COVID and everything that's happening, how has that changed in the past few months?
Oh, it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
I'll take a stab at that first. Well, Swing Left was fortunate enough to be a virtual organization prior to the pandemic. And so we had a lot of layers already built into our organizing structure because our staff is already remote and our volunteers in the States have so much autonomy. We try to create a baseline brand that they can roll with, and we come up with calls to action that we all agree on, but how they execute on the ground and what works in their communities is all determined by them. And so once the pandemic sent everybody indoors, we were able to pivot, and we also reached out to a lot of campaigns and other partners to hear how their pivoting went. The crazy thing about that moment was it was shortly after Super Tuesday, which is a huge inflection point for us typically, where folks are beginning to ramp up their staffing. Folks are moving across the country to go help out on races, relocating their lives, and preparing to sit in an office space with who knows how many people for the duration of the campaign. And that's the way that it's always been. And everything was just like a record scratch because that was impossible. So something as simple as supporter housing, like not a thing that we can do this year in the ways that we could, where we could just say, hey, we've got a safe space for you. You're going to be in the office all day anyway. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of folks immediately sheltered in place and are still sheltering in place. There are very few campaigns or organizations across the country doing in-person contact, and that's for obviously good reason. Swing Left won't be promoting or advising our volunteers to go to any in-person events this year. So we've already decided that's where we'll stand on it. But we do know there are folks out in the world who are doing it and who are trying to find safe ways to do it. And it's very risky. And so for the folks who are, or folks who are preparing for election day, which is kind of inevitable, we do have to be prepared for some type of in-person activism on the ground to help people when they get to their polling places. You know, this requires a lot of thought. And so considering CDC guidelines, making sure that you have good structures within your board of elections and poll greeters, poll watchers, poll observers. Our voter protection this year is just so much more important. But other than that, get on those phones because we're not really knocking doors. We're not knocking on doors. So phones, text messaging, and letter writing has become so much more important in this moment.
Anthony?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with everything Ashley said, but kind of building on that in terms of the thinking about teachers and educators and what kind of this moment is for them, and how that's relating to the political space is for years, you know, labor has spent time building our political programs in the summer in preparation for the fall so that we could be ready to knock doors for candidates, you know, block walks, in-person voter registration. There's a lot of the work that labor has done in the past, especially many teachers across this country have been great activists in their community. So this summer, we've really had to change things up. And I think, at least in Texas, we've taken it as an opportunity to bring the virtual world and the educational world together so that we've spent a lot of time doing virtual town halls with candidates, bringing our membership face-to-face with candidates to talk about public education and the importance of teachers and the essential role that they play in our society. And we think it's been really effective for us in finding ways to highlight the issues that are important for us, not just for Texas, but for the entire country, whether that's the HEROES Act or the CARES Act or any number of different things that are floating around Congress right now. So it's been a great opportunity for us to kind of get away from the in-person events and think about how we can leverage the virtual opportunities that we have, because we think it's brought more of our members into the process too, which I think is a great opportunity to get people involved in political activism that maybe they were prevented by whether it's capacity issues or being able to get to events due to childcare or a bill issue of their abilities in physically getting into events and things like that, or participating. So we think that this kind of, we've tried to use this opportunity to bring educators directly to candidates and candidates directly to educators to have those conversations. And they've been happening in the public space, which is even better, so that now the community can participate in those discussions as well. So I think those are some opportunities that we can take, both as labor organizations, as organizations representing teachers, to bring those folks face to face with the people that are going to represent them.
Ivan, this question is for you. What do you think is the most common need for candidates now outside of fundraising? So when they're setting up a bank account, or you're talking to them of how to develop like a strategy when it comes to accounting and fundraising, have you noticed any other ask or like brainstorming any new ways of like how to do outreach?
No, and there's a difference between the operations side and the outreach side, and I think as Ashley's suggesting, there are certain of these operations which are set up to be virtual from the get-go. And I would say sort of the banking and fundraising, so everything we do is connected to Act Blue. It's, all of these pieces are connected. Ashley's world being largely sort of virtual mobilization, that's already set up and ready to go. And we've been in the same situation. I do think that, one piece that we see is that from the broadest perspective, everybody right now is in a crucible. Like everybody in this country is in a crucible moment. And Anthony, my heart goes out to your members, because teachers are probably and health and frontline workers are the quintessential example of this. Of just to do your job is just so damn hard right now. And I think as campaigns going forward and thinking about volunteers and thinking about how to mobilize resources, nonprofits are under incredible strain. They're under financial strain. Their volunteers and members are under, they have different lives right now than they might have in a regular cycle. And so I think that is part of what everybody's trying to figure out, is how to operate in this much more intense environment. But as was noted, there's upsides to this. There's upsides to some of the online organizing, and it's figuring out how to maximize those strengths, because we need every single oar in the water for this election, and finding those volunteers, finding the voters who we're going to rely on community connections to go find, because we're not going to be able to go knock on their door or find them in a rec center or community center or a street corner. Like that is, we're going to rely a lot more on connections to be able to, and community connections and organizations to be able to do that work with us. So this partnership work, I just think is critical right now.
I agree. Anthony, what's the endorsement process like in your organization? Is it a membership vote, or does it come down to the political director, or is it like a small elected group that makes the endorsement for AFT?
In the Texas AFT world, we have a committee of elected leaders that handle endorsements. They take advice from the political staff, but at the end of the day, it's their decision as to who they want to endorse. That's how our endorsement process looks. I think one thing to kind of keep in mind across the board is when you're interacting with organizations like labor organizations and other organizations that do endorsements, I think it's always good to know what comes along with those endorsements. If folks are willing to endorse you, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're going to send a piece of mail on your behalf? Does it mean they're cutting you a check? Does it mean that you're getting folks to come and knock on the door, for your members and things like that? So I think it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind as to, when you're interacting with organizations and getting endorsements, is what do they mean in practice, for your candidate or for your org. So kind of something to keep in mind.
Ashley, how does Swing Left prioritize which races to get involved? And what does that process look like? Do you have a final say, or do you have a team in place to do the analysis and try to make the decision based on data or through conversation?
Yeah, so we have a team that focuses on all of our targeting, and we don't do endorsements. We support districts, and so Swing Left came to exist in 2016, and they were focused on working to flip the house in 2018. And so it started off as this website that was a swing district finder, and you could find your nearest swing district. So in a lot of ways, we've kept that same model. In the last year, the organization has grown. I worked on a Swing Left targeted race in 2018 and received help and resources from them as they were trying to flip the house. I worked on a U.S. House race in North Carolina and got to see what it was like to receive on the other end. What is happening right now is that we have made our decisions as far as targeted districts are concerned. So we have an analyst who's one of our political directors. He looks at each state, and based off of their flippability, we determine whether or not we'll support that race. And that is enhanced by our flippable team. So Swing Left merged with a group named Flippable that was focused on flipping state legislatures in 2018, and they had a lot of success. And so in 2019, they came together, and the Blueprint team has merged out of that, and they do our targeting, and they look at our targeting and say, these are the areas that we're going to be committed to supporting. And so Swing Left is primary agnostic. We wait until the primaries are over, and we support Democrats that come out of the races. So for example, if your district is on our list and you win your primary in that district, then on the other side of your win, you're going to automatically get funds directly to your campaign. And if there is volunteer capacity near you, we will funnel them directly into your campaign, and they are now your volunteers. Or we will export capacity from our other groups across the nation, and you can have access to them, which is super helpful this year because everybody's making phone calls. So whatever list they need out-of-state folks to call, that's an easy resource to plug in there. And so we focus on targeted districts. We monitor them. We stay in touch through partner tables. We have regular conversations with coordinated parties, with the coordinated campaigns, which is the effort of state parties and the campaigns individually investing in this one structure. So we communicate with the coordinated structure as well as the campaigns and the parties individually, just to make sure everything's running smoothly. And we assess their needs, and what they need, we try to fill in gaps. And so that is how our targeting and our support process works.
Ivan, like you mentioned before, you're at before you were banking, you used to do a lot of work in the climate space and the climate activism space. What were some of the metrics that you looked at, or maybe didn't look at, for endorsing a candidate? Or did you just mostly focus on their platform and the message they were running on?
I mean, I would say it's a different world in the environmental community now, but I think we look at the same things that labor might look at, same sort of process, but with an environmental screen on it. There is definitely, it's with an advocacy agenda in mind. So the environmental community is thinking about building an environmental majority to be able to pass legislation. And so the races they're targeting are about, the majorities that they need and the champions that they need to be able to execute that. And that's sort of the strategic vision behind it. But I think that when I say it's a different world now, when President Obama ran the first campaign, it was repeated to me because I wasn't on that campaign, but John Carson, who was the field director, shared that afterwards they kind of went back and looked at who all the volunteers were. And they looked at them by their association. And these folks were, first and foremost, came from the environmental community. The people who just walked in off the street on their own, had been involved with some sort of environmental group. They didn't come in through a relationship with the Sierra Club institutionally or with LCV institutionally, but they found their own way there. And I think that sort of said, going forward, okay, we need to start to think about how do we talk to those volunteers? How do we relate to them? How do we organize this community to really be able to, you know, get the most out of the energy that we're creating? So I think where you want to start is understanding what their issue agenda is, what they care about, and be able to talk to them about that in a sort of compelling, convincing, and legitimate way.
Thanks. I guess this is a question for everyone here. We have a lot of campaign managers, a lot of candidates on the call. What's like the ideal relationship between your organization and their campaign? And can you give them advice on like how to establish these relationships and maintain them throughout the cycle? We could start with Ashley and then go to Anthony and then Ivan.
Well, yeah, I think Anthony called out one of the important things, which is thinking about what they can provide for you. So you need to go into a conversation once it's time to talk to that partner about what resources can they provide. Are you able to provide funding? How do you issue that? Is that directly to us? Is that through a caucus? Like, what's the situation with that? Are you providing volunteer support? Are you amplifying us on social media? Are you able to help pitch in on ads? Are you able to buy a thing for us? Are you able to fund some of our organizers? Are you able to pay for our finance assistant? Like the list is almost endless of the things that different organizations provide. And so as a campaign manager or as senior staff on a campaign, you should initiate a conversation with partners and make sure that those are the questions that you ask ahead of time so you can walk out with clarity. Don't walk away from that conversation not knowing what exactly it is they can do from you, because you need to know that. And that's what you're spending your time talking about. So figure out what is the tangible that we get out of this. Is there something that we get out of this? Or is this just you're going to slap my name on a flyer? And if you are going to slap my name on a flyer, are you passing them out? Are you putting them in the mail? How are we taking advantage of that? And so I would just advise everybody to make sure that you have a list of things that you would love for somebody else to pay for, especially if you've already done your budget and you see here's how much I need to make it through election day. Think about the things organizations can take off of that plate for you and ask them if they're willing to support it if they're not already offering it up. Sometimes you just need to ask, and it may be a lever they can pull.
Anthony, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Ashley hit a lot of great points there, and I think the advice I would give for folks on how to build those relationships from campaign to organization, especially organizations that can endorse you and can provide things like money or volunteers, is to start those relationships as early as possible. You know, me as political director, I want to hear from candidates that are interested in being supported by teachers early on in the election cycle. You know, as soon as they announce their campaign, or even before they announce their campaign, you know, I would hope that they have the wherewithal to be reaching out to labor and especially to teachers to interact with us and hear what our folks care about, to hear about what our messaging is, what our legislative priorities are, what's happening on the ground right now in reality. Candidates that aren't willing to do that, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I have a limited amount of time as political director, and our organization has a limited amount of bandwidth, and we're going to want to work with folks that are interested in working with us and that are really, you know, desirous of our help and support. You know, if there are candidates that kind of take a, you know, kind of laissez-faire attitude towards it, you know, we don't prioritize them as highly as we do the candidates that are really interested in hearing about our members and hearing what our members are going through, and take an active role in doing that. And that starts with the candidate. There has to be some candidate work in those relationships too. It can't always be the campaign manager. It can't always be, you know, a staffer that's down the rungs reaching out. It can and should be the candidate sometimes to begin that relationship and build it, and then kind of hand it off to a staff member and stuff like that. Because I think what we're trading for as organizations is we want access and influence. And if we only know the deputy field organizer for one turf, you know, that's not what an organization is looking for. Like, we want to know the candidate, we want to know the campaign manager, we want to know the main senior advisor and have those relationships, chief of staff, whatever it is. So just something to think about, you know, in terms of how the levers of power get pulled on things like this.
Ivan, do you have any more advice?
Yeah, you know, big picture, I would take the time to really understand the organization and the leadership's theory of change. Like, what is it that's really, you know, that they're focused on long term? What are they trying to build? Why are they doing that? What is their interest in your campaign? You know, and then also understand their limitations and the challenges that they have. So don't spend time coming in and asking for things they can't legally give, right? And so, but all of that, if you do that work to really, you know, understand where they're coming from, understand what their reality is, it builds a relationship of trust and understanding and mutuality that I think will serve you well throughout the process. The other piece of that is under promise and over deliver. That if you're building these relationships for the first time, don't promise the moon, right? If Anthony's talking to you know, a turf field director, you know, and they're coming in and promising like, here's what the candidate's going to do for you, and then that doesn't sort of play out. Now they burned that relationship a little bit with Anthony, and so I feel like you want to manage expectations here and be real about it, because otherwise you're wasting people's time. So I think all of that is about just it's the basics of building a relationship, and that's what this is.
What are some other don't do's, right? Like you said, mismanaging relationships by over promising and underperforming. Can you give me some examples of when a candidate or a campaign really started off on the wrong foot, if you have any? We could start with Ivan on this one.
No, never. No.
So Anthony, you have any examples?
Yeah, I think I have an example that just kind of happened recently. It was over something silly, you know, but I think I would say this is, as a staff member representing a candidate, you are representing them in some very serious ways. You know, if you're the only person that we know from a campaign and we don't know the candidate very well and you're representing them, if you get off on the wrong foot with political directors or grassroots activists or even grass tops activists, and just get off on the wrong foot with those folks and kind of stick your foot in the mouth and don't really realize kind of you haven't read the room correctly or read the mood of the organization or, you know, things like that, and understanding what folks are going through. You know, I think it's an important thing to just be wary about. That is, understand the reality of what an organization is. Like teachers, for example, you know, teachers are extremely fearful right now about the situation around going back to school. You know, they are in a situation where they are having to be asked to do things that they have not been trained to do. Take temperatures of kids, disinfect classrooms, handle virtual school while at the same time handling a physical in-person classroom. I mean, they're being asked to do things that are just beyond. So as candidates, if you're interacting with labor or with teachers, with, you know, organizations in general, just be really wary about what their folks are going through, so that you don't kind of step into a political problem by accident without really just realizing what's going on.
Awesome. Ashley, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. You know, my job is to bring the goodies. Swing Left, we just want to give you all the good things. We want to give you money. We want to give you people. And we want to make that as seamless as possible. And because I was on a Swing Left supported race, I know exactly what it means and what they do well. And I know that the help from the organization was pivotal in making sure that I hit my GOTV goals and had the volunteers that I needed. So we try to insert ourselves as seamlessly as possible. And so when you're having an introductory conversation with an organization that is preparing to give you a thing, whatever that thing is, make sure you have a bit of understanding about all the options that they can provide, so that you don't ask for things that are kind of like outside of the box. Like, do a quick Google, go to their homepage, see what they're into, just so you can be prepared and have a frame of reference for that conversation. If you've never heard of the organization before, but they have said they want to give you money, set up the call immediately. One of my pet peeves is chasing down somebody via email, and we're literally just trying to wire them money that they don't have to do anything for. Like, our donors have already given. We've got ActBlue funds for every damn thing. Take the money. Just take my money. And sometimes, especially if you've just come right out of a primary and you're reshuffling your staff and you're transitioning, you know, stuff gets lost. Like, Chris and I were supposed to have a conversation yesterday. That got lost for me. Things happen, but make sure if it's money involved that you follow up. You can't just let a wire check hang out in the wilderness. So I think that's probably one of my pet peeves. Make sure you're checking your email, responding to organizations who have said they want to help you, and then be clear about what it is that you get, so you don't feel like it was a waste of time. You walk away knowing the things that you can get.
And for the record, there was no money involved in our conversation yesterday. Catch up.
This isn't a Trump situation at all, you guys.
Can you tell us some of those clear questions that you asked swing left, or now that you're getting from candidates, of like what they should expect, what are some goals? Like, if I was a new candidate running for office and I reached out, what are the top 3 questions I should ask off the bat?
Oh, what are the top 3 questions you should ask? 1, do you give money to candidates? And can we have it now? Swing left, our thing is to get money to candidates early. So I think Anthony was talking about this a little bit ago. And so that is a priority for us. And so we feel no pressure when you say, hey, when is this coming through? Because we want to send it to you just as quickly. So ask people about the transaction and when can they complete it out the gate. 2, if they do have access to volunteers, you should be asking, hey, do you have volunteers in our area? How can we plug them into our structure? Here's our organizing director. Here's our political director. How can we start building relationships with the volunteers that you've been cultivating while we were doing this other thing? So that should be your second question. Your third question should be like, what other bases can they cover? I mean, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Like, I'll give an example. In 2018, I had probably about 7 field organizers, and I had an army of fellows. It was over 100. And the only thing I wanted was the dialer, because I had the capacity. So those of you that don't know what the dialer is, you'll find out. But the dialer is basically a tool that campaigns use, and you dial in and you plug your headphones in and it just dials for you. And as soon as someone answers, it comes through, and you don't have to dial by hand. Everything's done for you. But in order for it to work seamlessly, has to be a lot of people on the dialer. It's also extremely expensive. So folks do it for maybe 2 hours at a time, 4 hours at a time. And you have to be really thoughtful and make sure that you have the volunteer capacity at the exact same time, so you don't waste the money. And one of the things that was important to me was finding someone who would take on paying for that. And so in that circumstance, the D-Trip said, hey, we'll pay for your dialer, and let's get it rock and rolling. We had folks who supported our hustle program, and so all of our text messaging was covered. We had to ask folks if they would cover these things, and they said yes. So again, make your budget, look through it, and say, hey, maybe there are some people who can take these things off of our plate. Maybe they'll pay for tablets for our folks once we can go outside and start doing lit drops and knocking on doors. Like, ask those questions.
Great. Anthony, you mentioned that a lot of your teachers, a lot of your members always get involved in the campaign. How do you share those metrics with the campaigns that you work with? Do you allow all the members to flow through the campaign, or do you do it in-house and send updates to the campaign?
I think that's really a case by case basis, and what I've done it a lot of different ways over the years. In the labor movement, we have central labor councils, where the groups of unions come together, whether it's the plumbers and the food and commercial workers, teachers all together, and we're kind of pooling all of our resources, and we run field programs that way. That's been done in Texas many a time. The Texas AFL-CIO has a great program set up for this year to try to flip the Texas House, which we're really excited about our prospects to do that, especially in a redistricting year. So I think that it's done a lot of different ways, whether we're sending our volunteers to a labor field program or whether we're sending them directly to candidates. I think that also depends on the level of friendship and relationship we have with candidates too. If we have a candidate that can't say two words without saying teacher or public education, then that's somebody that we're going to be really supportive of and working with quite closely. If we don't have to go to them and ask them to put out messages or statements in support of teachers or talk about teachers or do events with teachers, and they're doing it, endogenously, and they're kind of starting that process and really kind of going forward on that themselves, those are the folks that we're going to be really interested in just sending our volunteers directly there, because our teachers are going to be excited to work for somebody like that. Just because you persuade me as political director isn't the end all be all. You know what I mean? You have to persuade our membership to really want to get out there and be excited for you too. That's what I think some of these candidates forget sometimes, is like, just because they get the stamp of the AFL-CIO or the AFT or whatever, like that's one piece of it, but you have to get those on the ground teachers and educators and labor union members excited about you too, and excited about your candidacy. So, if you want to see labor people walking into your office, you got to get those folks excited about you and excited about what you're going to bring to the table. So it's a piece of advice I would give to folks.
Great. If folks have questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll have Julia read them out to the panelists. But one question from me, if people had to leave today with one insider knowledge, one insider tip about your organization or building relationship, what would that be? We could start with Ivan and go to Ashley, then Anthony.
Yeah. I think every outside organization has a program, right? If they're not walking into the election cycle new, it's likely a program they've been running every year in and out. And they have rules that are set by their tax status and how they're organized, and they have rules and programs that are set by their board of directors, but they have a program. And so what you want to know is, what's that program? Does it, let's go through the list. I think Ashley was sort of going through, is it money? Is it endorsements? Is that done separately? That could be done on the, some of the endorsements could be done on the IE side, but mobilizing members can be done directly through their organization, but with a limit. So you want to understand what their program is and just know that they have one, that they're not making this up as they go along. And so the quicker you get into understanding that, then what's inbounds, what's out of bounds. Do I need to be talking to somebody else if they're not in the right part of the organization? But know that they have a program and figure out what it is.
Awesome. Ashley?
Yeah, this one's a fun question. I'm trying to think of a really good one. Like, the best that I can think, like, swing left, we cut the check. Like, that's literally, where's the bag, sis? Like, that should be your question if you're talking to me at Swing Left. Swing Left in 2018 used to do this cool thing where, as the House candidates would win their primaries, they would have like this unity party in each of the districts, and the volunteers would meet the candidate for the first time post-primary, and they would give them this giant blue check. It was insane. I think ours was for several $100,000. It was ridiculous. It was a giant blue check. And that's like a metaphor. Like, we will give you the big check. And so your question should always be, hey, am I on your targeted list? If that's a yes, when is the check coming and how much and how many do we get? One of the things that folks don't think about is, okay, at some point you may max out. And so let's think creatively very early on. If there's a campaign limit, and we reach that giving to your campaign directly, what other ways can we give so that you can be benefited? And again, that goes to what I was saying about sending money through caucuses, because maybe the caucus is supporting or sending money to the coordinated. If the coordinated is supporting your campaign and several other campaigns, then it'll still be a benefit to you. And so talk about all the ways. One, how much money can you possibly get so that you can plan your budget for the year? And we're super transparent about that when we talk to folks. Like, hey, we'll let you know before money's coming through the door so that you can make smart funding decisions and save your money. Ultimately, that's what we're supposed to do. And so if you maintain communication with us, we're regularly in each other's inbox. You know about how much money we just sent and what's coming next. If there's more coming next, then you're in a good routine with the organization, and there shouldn't be any holes in you being supported through election day.
Awesome. Anthony?
Did you want me to answer that one or answer the one in the chat?
If you have any other insider tips, that would be great, but then we could move over to the chat after that.
I will just give one quick insider tip, is that organizations will judge you on your sophistication or lack of organization as a campaign and candidate. You will be judged. Like if we send you a questionnaire, for example, to fill out a questionnaire about your position on public education, for example, or if Swing Left has a questionnaire and they send out a questionnaire asking you for your policy positions, and we never get it back from you, or we have to chase you for it or something like that, like, you will be judged. And that judgment, it may end up just being a couple funny jokes, but it could also result in your campaign not getting its check quickly enough. You know, like Ashley just talked about, having to chase down somebody with a wire transfer and things like that. So I would just be, you know, when you're dealing with big organizations like unions, like big progressive organizations like Swing Left or Planned Parenthood, NARAL, you know, some of the real big ones, the environmental organizations that do a lot of endorsements, like, you know, be very cognizant of that those folks are representative of lots and lots of people, and their time is valuable. And if you can't find a way to organize your campaign or organize your staff to respond to that stuff, then those are political mistakes. Like, you're making political mistakes, you know. So I'd urge you to be really wary about that. You know, somebody asked me a second ago in the Q&A, what's the best way to make connections with organizations? Should we just send an email? And I kind of said too, I'll throw out another insider tip, is send somebody a text. Like, if you really care and really want to make a connection with somebody and on a campaign or a political director, shoot a text to them. Like, they'll respond to you eventually, maybe not in that moment, but, you know, a text is kind of tells me somebody really wants to get in touch with me. An email, you know, an email is easy to forget or not respond to, but a text can be sometimes very helpful, you know, to make those connections. So I'd throw that out there to folks too.
Dude, can I stack on that? Because Anthony, you just like opened up a portal in my mind. Like, yes, on questionnaires, you will get an onslaught of questionnaires very early on. So another insider trait, make sure you have assigned somebody to own the questionnaires, because if Anthony's waiting on his questionnaire to be returned to AFT and I'm waiting at Swing Left, that's 2 checks and 2 sets of volunteers that you've dropped the ball on simply because you didn't have somebody own that part of the inbox. Questionnaires get people caught up. There were so many incumbents that we had to chase this year that we knew we were going to support. We just needed them to go and check the boxes and confirm that they are not crazy. We've already vetted them. I need you to write down that you make sane stances and the check will come. And we had to chase some folks for weeks or months. So that one will become a priority to you immediately as soon as you come onto a campaign. If you're starting from scratch, those questionnaires are going to start rolling into your PO box and your email inbox quickly. So just keep an eye on both and respond.
And on that, always have a headshot ready and a bio ready to send back to them, because they're going to ask for it. So I'm going to kick it to Julia. She's going to say some of the questions that are in the chat.
How do you keep your integrity and build transparency into these relationships? So I think this is coming from a campaign perspective. Any advice that you all have on how to maintain integrity and a strong relationship?
I'll take a shot at that. Because I think it's a great question. And I think campaigns, all big organizations can be places where you want to try to be really judicious about the information you put out, because it's possible to get burned by that. But my instinct is to be as candid as you can and to be straightforward about what you know, what you don't know, what's in the range of possibility. Be as candid as you can, be their ally. And there's a chance you might get burned by that. But if you're acting out of integrity and you're acting from a place of both obviously helping your campaign, but helping them, I don't think you're really going to get burned. And if you are, that's on them. So I just tend to, operate from a place of just, tell it like it is. There's no state secrets, I mean, there are probably a few, but, but be as honest as you can, and people will appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll stack on what Ivan said about honesty. Like, we were building a partnership a couple months ago, and we started having conversations in February, and then March happened, and then we tried to restart them in April, and life was still happening, and we really didn't have a quality conversation until June. And that was because we took a moment to email each other and say, hey, can I just give you a call and we can chat for like 15, 30 minutes? And I learned about the cadence of that partner's day, and that the day I schedule a meeting is the 2-day block that she schedules every meeting with every organization. So when I talked to her, her brain was fried. So now I know, okay, for our partnership to work well, I need to call her on a different day, and we need to check in regularly so that our partnership continues to move seamlessly throughout the election cycle, and we don't drop the ball on anything. And so now we have a really good texting relationship. We call each other once every week, and we just post check that. And so that is a really good tip. Like, definitely go straight to your sources, get to know them, and ask them questions about what is your ask of me right now? What do you need from me? I end every conversation with, what do you need from me, so that I can walk away clear with my marching orders. And before that, I ask them, like, what can I do for you? And what else is needed to, before we talk to each other again? Do you feel like you have everything that I can give you? And so those are just like really good things to make sure you keep in mind in those ongoing conversations to maintain a relationship.
Thanks for the question, Mike. And hi, just for full disclosure, I used to see Mike at the neighborhood swimming pool where I take my compost every week, and he was volunteering on his weekends doing that before he went off to go work on a campaign at some point last year. We do some client briefings that tend to be in spaces of sort of fraud, information security. There's a sort of range of things we do for clients. But we spend probably, I would say, a lot more time working with our clients in just a more one-on-one sort of relationship way. So I constantly have consulting clients who are calling me up and saying, hey, I'm thinking about working for this group, as on contract, who should we be talking to? Is this stuff real? What's their, how do they operate? We get calls from campaigns. I think in a time gone by, bankers used to be relationship folks, and they were people you knew, and people you had to trust in, and you knew that those bankers had relationships all about the community. That's why you wanted to, be close to your banker. Plus you wanted credit, right? And so that is still the kind of relationship we have with our clients, because it is so much within the family of the progressive movement. And so we spend a lot of time with our clients working as partners on their agenda.
Ashley, I think we had that follow-up for you.
Wait, what was the question, you guys? I was just so wrapped up in Ivan's relationship building, and then I thought about when I was working in banking while I was consulting on campaigns, and how mind-jarring that was. So what was the question?
Happy to repeat. Are there opportunities for partner table members and Swing Left volunteers to receive issue and policy briefings?
So that's a great question. Swing Left is all electoral, so we don't host any type of policy briefings, and we don't really promote too much policy. We promote the needs of our partners, and we amplify the policy that's important to them as it relates to, positive things that are needed in the progressive movement. But we ourselves don't own any type of policy work. What we do is listen in on everyone else's policy work. So as political director at Swing Left, I'm on a lot of calls hearing readouts from other organizations, those like establishment orgs like the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, those orgs, that's totally normal. And then also state parties and campaigns and getting readouts from them about what they're hearing on the ground as we move closer to election day. So we don't do policy work, but we are still in tune with the policies that are affecting our partners because it affects the movement. So we mostly focus on mobilizing voters and that check.
I just got a flag here that Ashley and Anthony keep talking about checks and wire transfers, and I'm talking about relationships, which is why Ashley is like, "Oh, wait, what is this banker talking about? This is different."
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we have a question from Saul, and I'm gonna, I think Anthony put a great answer to this in the chat, but also just want to share it out. With organizations where endorsement votes are open to all members, how can a candidate use their relationship with a few members of an organization to help deliver an endorsement? So just wondering about how to use outside relationships.
I can take that one. I've been in many coaching situations with candidates where we're making sure that they are shoring up relationships that will lead to an endorsement. If you know that you're seeking an endorsement or there's an endorsement that you need to have before election day, then as soon as your staff is on the ground, you need to be organizing one-on-ones with the folks on those boards who make the decisions and anyone who's going to be able to cast a vote. How can you get to them and have conversations with them prior to it? There's nothing that upsets boards or members more than meeting you for the first time the day that they're supposed to vote. And so you should do your best to get ahead of that ball. When I worked on the congressional race in 2018, there were several endorsement processes going on, and one of them was really local. And so we had to look at the board and say, hey, Kathy, who do you know? And let's go ahead and set up a quick call to them so we can chat and ask them, what do you need to know before you go into this conversation? Sometimes boards may invite you in for interviews and they may give you the questions before, they may not. But if you know those members, you should absolutely ask them what you need to be prepared to discuss. And usually they are willing to do that as long as it doesn't go against any rules. And so make friends with the folks who are going to make those final decisions for you, because nothing is worse than looking up at the last minute and realizing you didn't have coffee with that one person and that vote shut down an endorsement that you were counting on. That sucks. It's definitely happened to me in different campaigns, super local or federal, what have you. So those are things you should keep your eye on.
We have a great question from Sherland in the chat, which is, what are some of the tools someone would need to be a good political director, and where are there resources to assist in that development? Also, just, I think I want to tack on to this, if it's all right, would love to hear a little bit about your own pathways and trajectories into the role of a political director, and hopefully frame that for Sherland about how you all ended up where you are and things that were helpful for you in coming to a role of political director. I'll follow my own best practices that Chris has probably laid out as well. And so maybe Anthony, could you start off with this one, and then Ivan and Ashley?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the traits of being a good political director in this space is your relationships. I think that's what helped bring me to Texas AFT, because I've been in my role with Texas AFT just for a few months now. I was with UFCW for a long time before that, but when I was interviewing for this position, I just knew all of the people they asked me about. Like every politician and every organization and every player in the space, they're like, "Do you know this person?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know that person. I had lunch with them yesterday, or I just had coffee with that person." Or, so like being a political director is so relationship based, which I know is tough in this COVID environment. You know what I mean? Because it's hard to go to lunch with people. It's hard to have coffee with people. It's hard to do those things that really make our work successful, and building those relationships and those ties between people. But that's where I would go to start with is meet every politician in your space, meet every elected official, talk to the chiefs of staff, talk to their campaign managers. Be willing to have conversations with anybody that wants to have a conversation with you, that is tangential to your space, because you never know when that person may end up moving into a position higher up on a campaign or in an organization where that can be mutually beneficial. So, I would just focus on that. It's really, that's the building blocks of being a good political director is building those relationships with the people in your space that can really make a difference for your organization, or that you can help nurture along to help them grow in their role, and then be able to work with them on a project in the future. So that's how I would approach it, is look for opportunities to build those relationships with the folks that are directly impacting your organization, and just be the guy or the girl that knows everybody, and can bring anybody to the table, and can put disparate actors together, because you never know what can come from those relationships. So that's what I would urge folks to think about.
I think I'm next. Or was it Ivan?
You do Ivan, then Ashley.
I'll say it's tough to follow Anthony, because I think he kind of nailed it. I mean, I got into this role because I cared about two things: I cared about climate change, I cared about elections, and so there was sort of a job for me. It was not many, that was the one, and so there I was. I think what Anthony's talking about in terms of talking to anybody, engaging everybody, building, is really about building a team. And so it probably goes back to, I think, Julie, you were setting up the first norms of the call of respect, empower, include. That is how you build a team. And you want everybody on your team. And that's your role as political director, is to build that kind of relationship and that kind of loyalty and trust. And so respect, empower, include is how you do it. And I have so many, the one thing I am is old. And the one thing I understand is there's so many instances of people who were like an intern or a brand new reporter on some totally bogus, trade magazine, that now they're a reporter for Politico, right? And, it is, everybody's on a journey, and everybody treat them with the respect they deserve. You help them. And those are relationships that will last throughout your career, and you never know when they're gonna come back to work with you. And the people that I worked with when I was sort of political director for the climate bill campaign, it was, I still know all of those people, and they are doing incredible stuff right now. And it's, but we were just a team where I just trusted every single one of them every day. I work to empower them and help them do their jobs better. And that's how relationships are built.
Yeah, I always say being a political director is a lot like being a professional friend. It doesn't require you to go out for drinks necessarily, but you should definitely be friendly and somebody who can have a conversation and is a good work buddy. For me, I learned everything that I needed to know in order to be a good political director when I was an organizer. I started off as a volunteer in 2008 and just kept knocking until Barack Obama eventually decided to hire me. And I organized my college campus and learned a ton in that experience. And from there, was a field organizer for several years. And the organizing space taught me everything that I needed, which was, one, your job is to build relationships to where folks are going to support the candidate or support the cause because it's important to them, but they'll continue to follow up. They'll continue to come in and help out the campaign with volunteering their time if you have a good relationship with them. So the candidate or the cause only gets them through the door. You're the one who controls whether or not they're going to feel comfortable to continue doing that and providing and helping you hit your goals every day. And so I try to keep that in mind. I've been everything from a field organizer to an organizing director. I've been a campaign manager. I've worked for independent expenditures. I've worked for nonprofits. I've worked for local campaigns. I've worked for national campaigns. And so the one thing that has remained constant is that you should be nice to people, because like Ivan was saying, these folks will pop back up in your life. Like, you're gonna see them again, and you want to be honest with people. Like, I have old field organizers who didn't necessarily take my recommendation for their next gig and do great about it. And it sucks to say, hey, I can't give you another recommendation. You got to work harder. And, you know, maybe we'll talk about it later. But if you have a loving relationship with somebody, or not necessarily loving, but a very clear and quality working relationship where you can be honest, then, you know, folks can receive that feedback and do better. It also is super helpful when you're looking to help other organizations or your own organization staff up. So at Swing Left has open positions. I posted on Facebook, I posted on Twitter, I'll post it on LinkedIn so that my friends can see that and they can share that. So if they want to apply, cool. If they know somebody who should, that's great as well. And so making sure that you are building relationships where folks see you as trustworthy. They feel comfortable sharing information that sometimes may not put them in the best light, but they want to work to a mutual solution. Maintain that open door policy. And if somebody burns you, just know they'll probably need you later. Don't even take it personally. It will happen and you will see them again, especially if you continue working in the same places. So if you're going to continue to work in DC, you'll definitely see them again. If you're going to continue to work in your state and they're heavy in that state, then you're going to see them again. So no matter how far somebody pushes you, just remember you'll see them again. So you don't want to burn it all to the ground, because maybe you'll get a chance at some quality retribution later. Somebody said, what does it mean to burn somebody? They might set you up for a really bad situation. Like, the best I can describe is I've been in a situation where I was working hard during a primary, and a primary opponent's staff forced me into a TV interview because my candidate wasn't there. And it just was an opportunity for them to get a news clip out of it. And make it go viral and take an opportunity to kind of drag the candidate off of something that I may have said. And so folks will do things like that to burn you, and you can't really, take it to heart. I mean, the battle is long and arduous. So take your bumps, but also, like, don't let anybody punk you, and don't let anybody compromise your integrity. If somebody's putting you in a situation where you feel like you need to speak up and speak out, that is imperative. Bring your whole self to your work is what I tell folks working around me. Don't leave any piece of you behind. And if you don't feel comfortable to bring your whole self to the work that you're doing, particularly in the political space, then it's not going to go well.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to jump in just very quickly and say kind of something dovetailing on what Ashley was talking about, the kind of mark of a political director being a kind of professional friend, which I like that verbiage in a lot of ways. And I was just going to say also that I think one mark of a good political director, you can ask yourself this question, is if your organization is involved in a competitive primary, okay, between two candidates, like in the Democratic side, for example, and your organization has endorsed one candidate, if you can still have a good relationship with the people on the campaign that you didn't endorse, and you can still call those people and talk to those people and have conversations with them, and then build a relationship if their candidate wins that primary, that's the mark of a good political director. Like if you can maintain those types of relationships in an environment where you're in a competitive primary or a very competitive race, and still be able to talk to both sides of an equation and help build bridges after that, I think that's the mark of it. And that's how you should look at it and think about, could I do something like that? Am I going to take this situation too personally? Am I going to get too emotionally invested in my own candidate or cause to not be able to see the big picture? Those are some good kind of questions to ask yourself. So I just wanted to dovetail on that. And now, Julia, I will ask you to remind me the question that Laura asked me one more time, please.
I'm gonna have to find this again. I think the question was along the lines of if two candidates are fairly similar, what are some good ways to sort of tip the scales when it comes to the endorsement process?
Yes, absolutely. I'll answer quickly so Ivan and Ashley can weigh in too. I think some of the things that I'm looking at as a person who advises endorsers. Our educators are the ones who endorse. I just advise them. When they're in conversations like that where you have two candidates that are relatively similar, some of the things you're going to want to take into account are viability. How likely is that person to win the district that they are fighting for? How good a bet is it to put resources into that district? Is it a district that Trump won 20% last time around? Do we have a chance this time to do it? And what's the pathway to get there? Or some kind of questions to ask. How good is their fundraising? How broad is their fundraising network? Are they just getting big checks from a couple of corporate, lawyers or corporate entities, or are they, have a lot of low dollar donors spread across the community, which kind of indicates a lot of support. So those are some questions to ask. How strong is your fundraising? How viable is your district? Do you have a plan to win? For local races, do you have a campaign manager? If you're flying by the seat of your pants in a state legislative race without a campaign manager, that tells organizations that you're not really serious, that you're just kind of kidding around about your race, because you really need a strong campaign manager in a lot of these races to win. So those are some things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'll say keeping my swing left hat on. We don't endorse in primary. So one of the things I would tell somebody is to know what it is that they actually provide. Is it an endorsement during the primary or after? There are several folks who get upset with us because we are supporting their district and they're in a heated primary and they're like, well, you say early money is important. Well, I need it early so I can beat these folks. And we have to explain that's not what we mean by that. We need you to win your primary first and then we'll see you on the other side. But of course, we have conversations with folks that are in primaries because we don't know who's going to come out on the other side. So just like Anthony was saying, maintain good relationships so that the conversation can stay open until the final numbers come in. If you are in a situation where you need to tip the scales, that's where it's really important that the structure of your staff and your current programs and practices are good so you can speak to those. If your candidates look the same on paper, you should be able to say, hey, but they don't have a CM, like Anthony was saying. So they're not able to make strategic decisions. They don't have a fundraising director. Our fundraising director is making 50 calls a week by herself, and she's helping our candidate make X amount of calls a week, and that's how we're bringing in X amount of dollars. Speak to your cash. Stand on your money. However much money you raise, tout that, especially if you know it's more than what your opponents have done, because money can be a signal that you're ready to go. And in a more in a better position than your opponents. And so if you're trying to tip the scales, those are the things that folks can see. But also make sure that all of your external facing materials are quality. Make sure your website is not something that's going to get me a virus on my computer, or it's going to get me catfish. Like, make sure that you have a regular cadence in how you're communicating, you're maintaining your social media. If we see your volunteers out, if you're doing all the things that you should do and hitting the clear benchmarks and your opposition isn't, then that makes your star shine brighter.
Because I'll just focus on that part of the question of like comparing the track record of different candidates or their position on different issues. Because I think whatever a candidate puts up on their website, and you might feel like you're in a primary, you're kind of maybe got the same positions because, you know, people on a political campaign can read what the advocacy groups say, and they can kind of translate that into their own thing, and they're all reading the same stuff. I just think it leaves the issue understanding too shallow. And I think this is not just in a primary situation, but can also be relevant if you're thinking about how much attention do you get in the general? Are you going to be a real champion? Because I think you can always do work to find out what's behind the issue positions, right? And how do you, if you're working on a campaign and your candidate supports 100% renewable electricity, they support protecting this wilderness area, and they support these health standards, and everybody has the same thing because they read it on NRDC or LCV's like website. But go find out and talk to those staffers and really understand more about the issues. Learn about what they left off the table. You know, understand where they're coming from with some of this stuff and why they picked it from an organizing perspective. What are their hopes and ambitions and their political strategy in the next legislative session? Because I think if you start to understand beyond just the positions, then you're in a better position to kind of make a case that you're the better candidate in a primary, or you're the best candidate, you know, that if you're the candidate that wins the general, you're going to be the one that makes a difference for them as a champion, not just a solid vote.
I'll just stack on Ivan real quick because he just reminded me of a thing. Like, in the old days where we could go outside, a lot of times the org would just pop up in your office to see how your office is doing and kind of fit in as normal volunteers, and they may not announce themselves. So you better have a recycling bin if Sierra Club pops in, because that is going to make a difference when they go back to the office and say, hey, I haven't even seen your recycling bin over there. What do these guys have going on? And I've been in that situation where one of my candidates that was a sitting mayor freaked out because we moved to a new office and she didn't see a recycling bin, and I made it happen. And she said I would take it home and sort it myself, but I need the city to know that I am serious about this. So little things like that, once we do get to go back outside, make sure that you're practicing what you preach and you look like what it is that you're supporting.
Awesome. Julia, do we want to do one more question, and then we'll do a quick fire question and then wrap it up?
Awesome. So we have a question from Ashley Williams in the chat, just asking about any tips you all have for mutually beneficial partnerships and things that sort of how to make the road go both ways. I also saw Ashley Blue smiling because I think Ashley Blue is familiar with Ashley Williams. So why don't I kick it to Ashley, then Ivan, and then Anthony.
I do. Just saying that name made me so happy. So hey, Ashley, we should talk later. Mutual partnerships, that's a really good question. Right now I'm trying to forge some relationships with organizations where we think there might be opportunities for partnering. So I'll give some examples. We have already run through most of our slate. There's some primaries that are still outstanding, of course, in Georgia and Florida. And once those are done, you know, we will have our slates nationwide locked in. And so we this goes back to the conversation I was having about maxing out. We are anticipating maxing out to candidates. And so we're trying to think creatively about how can we still get money out the door to support folks, since we can't give directly to their campaigns once we max out. And there are opportunities to create joint funds with other organizations and find who are the candidates that we both have supported. And let's find a way that we can both tag team and get them more money with a completely different fund and joint venture. And so thinking outside of the box on what are our common denominators. So we're supporting over 150 people in the House. So we only had 6 candidates that matched between their slate and ours, but we can rock and roll with those 6. That's a really good place to start. And so doing a bit of research on the organization, see what their mission is for the election cycle or for that moment, and then try to presuppose, hey, I think there are some places for alignment here, and then talk through them when you have your conversations with them over the phone. I think taking advantage of our Zoom conversations right now and digging into, okay, what are you guys doing right now? And remembering that this moment is really loud because we have an election and we have a maniac that we need to vote out of office. But also, we have redistricting to worry about. We have so many more things that we have to keep our eye on the ball regarding in 2021 and 2022. And so make sure that you're having those conversations as well. Like, this moment is important. And yes, we have a lot of shit we need to get done by November, but also what can we collaborate on long term that's going to meet goals for both of
us? I would say start every phone call or conversation or Zoom knowing what you want, but go into it with the mindset of, you want to give more than you're going to get. And you are there to help the other person. And that may be counterintuitive if you're sort of wearing a campaign hat. But I tell you that the person who gets on the phone with Anthony and says that, you go through all the stuff that you're going to go through in that conversation, but is like saying, okay, in this school district, where do you stand with those members going back or not, whether they're going to be in person, what's safe, like what are there calls I can make for you, or are there calls the candidate can make for you? Like, think about where you can help these groups and move their agenda in that moment, and how you can give more than you get. And I just think it's inevitable that it'll come back and pay dividends at the end of it.
Anthony, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Ashley and I haven't said it all. So, I appreciate where both of them are coming from.
Cool. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to end with this quick, lighthearted, quick fire question. You guys have survived years of being in this space, and whether it's in the electoral space, nonprofit space. What are some tips to survive the rest of 2020? We can start with Ivan, who I think is on vacation, so that's maybe one way he's doing it. Then we could kick it to Anthony, then to Ashley.
First week of vacation in 2020. Here's my gin and tonic. It's going all right. Working most of the vacation. 2020 is a kind of tough year to survive, but I'll tell you, if we get to the other side of this one, we're going to be in great shape. I think, there's like a ton of cliches about it's a marathon, not a sprint. Maybe I'd go back to actually what Ashley was saying, is you're in this role, in this job, you're a professional friend to folks. And I think what I found is that those friendships are really nurturing and supportive, and they give a lot back, right? And so, the reason I'm on the phone today is because, a long time ago, I worked with somebody and we developed a friendship out of that. And so she will call me up, Abby, and say, hey, couldn't you do this thing? Right. And I'll do anything for her. Right. And so that's just, you get relationships like that. And I think they're actually what matter in this work, because we're in the people business, right? That's what democracy is. And so if you approach the work and the relationships from that perspective, you will get a lot out of it in the tough times and the good times, but particularly in the tough times.
Thank you. Anthony?
I think the best way to survive this time is to wear a mask.
Keeping it simple and right. Ashley?
And that's on period. I would add to that, wash your hands. Very important. The other thing, remember that get out the vote is a grueling time. It's technically the last 96 hours of our campaign cycle, but in reality, it started on the 1st. So one thing that I'm going to be intentional about reminding and reinforcing with my team, and I hope that y'all do, is own some self-care piece that you can maintain. For those of you who are already on a campaign, if you know you're about to be deployed into a campaign, if you're working in this cycle in any form or fashion, keep in mind that we are in the middle of a pandemic, which is already stressful enough. And that is something that none of our brains are wired to understand. And so it's really important that we take self-care seriously so that we don't burn out. And we also create space so that the people who look to us as models, anyone who may report up to us, and our colleagues who report alongside of us, that we all are showing that we're going to take care of ourselves and be serious about it. So I'm just encouraging everybody to think of one thing. It doesn't need to be a stretch of something you've never done and you want to do, but pick one thing, own it, and do that through election day. So mine is I'm going to continue to read books. I love reading autobiographies, and so I've got a stack of them, and I'm going to keep reading, and I'm going to finish the books. I'm not just going to start them, I'm going to finish them, and then I'm going to move on to another one until we get to election day. And so I also bought a bike. That's going to be helpful. So think of your thing, own that thing, stick with it through election day. Don't go crazy. Wear your mask, wash your hands.